And are we live? I am seeing a commercial. There you go. I believe we're live. I don't think I made it to have commercials, but so it is. But welcome, everyone. This is Aeon Byte Live, I believe, episode 18. On this, well, at least on my side of the world, very balmy summer day. And it's great to have everyone here. And the chat room will be filling up very soon, and we will get started. Again, this is video only, and I think you'll enjoy this show because it will have a lot of visuals. The audio version, and as always, will be out in a couple of days, probably a little, maybe like 4 days, because this weekend I am going to a wedding in Milwaukee. So I'll be busy, but you will have the audio version and all our channels, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and all those good places. So welcome, everybody, and welcome to the desert of the real. You are the final authority, as always, and we hope we can bring you that saving gnosis so you can find out who you are and what reality is not, as I always say. So with us, we definitely have a special guest, and our guest here is Sid Charise Ropp. How are you doing, Charise?
Oh, Sid. Just fine, thanks.
Yes, I do. Well, thank you very much for coming on. We will be discussing your two books, the Gnostic Gospel, Illuminated, and their book, A Simple Explanation of Absolutely Everything. Two books I really enjoyed, and I think the audience will enjoy it immensely. So thank you for coming.
My pleasure. I'm honored.
Honor is all ours. And with us tonight, as always, we've got the Moon Dog. And for those who can see, he's got a cosmic background. How you doing, Vance?
Oh, I'm just swimming through the universe, waiting for something to start.
Across the universe, as John Lennon saying. Awesome. Well, again, the chat room is filling up. We will be taking audience questions in time. So if you have a question, please, yes, as strange as it might seem, or please write how do you like it, Vance? A question mark. Is there anything more obvious than a question mark you like?
A couple more, 3 question marks. That's this way they all blur into one big one for me,
A trinity of question marks. Good.
Yes.
And we do have super chat. So if anybody wants to donate money, I always appreciate it. But if you do a super chat, you will be put at the top of the queue, unless your question is just, out of bounds, if you would, because this is the internet and there's always some strained ones and live ones here. So, but welcome everyone to the chat room. And again, welcome to Aeon Byte Live. So, Sid, we'd like to get to know you since this is your first time here at the virtual Alexandria, as I like to say. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to the esoteric path.
Well, that's a gigantic question. So I've always been a philosophical child. I mean, I remember all the way back. I've got a really good memory even of childhood. And my brother Billy is 9 years older than I am. And he actually grew up to be a philosopher. He was turned into a Ph.D. philosopher and taught philosophy for 30 years at the university. So I was actually his little sister. And he and I have been philosophizing ever since I was at least 4 years old and on. So I've got a highly developed philosophical mind. But I'm also very spiritual. And I believe that I came to Jesus. I'm a Christian early, really early, like 5 years old. I had a conversion experience and was baptized volitionally that young. And then I've been reading, and so I consider the Bible to be esoteric material. So my first many years, I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, so all of that hippie stuff was going on, and my Christian path was not the ordinary type. It was more like the one-way movement. Do you remember that? Do you remember the one-way T-shirts and the chick tracts, the going to hell chick tracts? So I used to do that. I used to wear the shirt and pass out the chick tracts. So I was like a street corner evangelist for a while there. And anywho, went to university. I'm a real smart kid. And It's very interesting. It's hard to be a highly spiritual, it's hard to stay on a spiritual plane when you're going to the university, even back in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. I always had people tell me to dial back, just get practical. So anyway, here I am. Does that tell you enough?
Certainly does. Well, I guess the other question, since it will be the topic, your book, The Gnostic Gospel, Illustrated, sorry. For some reason I was reading about the Illuminated.
No, it is illuminated.
It is illuminated. Okay.
Because it's like a joke. It's a double entendre. It's illumination in the sense of illuminated manuscripts. There we go. And it's also illuminations as in gnosis.
Right. Yes. So, yeah.
So you're right.
I am right. Good. But it is kind of illustrated when you think about it.
It is.
Well, like I was, I don't know. I don't know if people know this, but I was a born again Christian for about 6 months when I was 17. And then, eventually logic kicked in. Like, wait a second, the end of the world is coming. How does Satan not do something about it? You know, if I know about this, shouldn't Satan be reading the Bible and say, wait a second, you know, questions like that? And then,
but listen, I have similar questions when I read David Icke and the shape-shifting reptilian stuff. How come they're not shutting him down? Come on.
He works for the Queen of England.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but anyway, I read other things besides the Bible. In addition, I read the Tao. So for many years, I consider myself to be a Taoist Christian. And I read the Tao Te Ching. And I have, in fact, in my simple explanation, you probably noticed there were several Tao in there that I had rewritten using my simple explanation philosophy.
Yes, a lot of it in there. It's an eclectic work. But so my next question is, how did you come to know the Tripart Tractate? I mean, I thought it was interesting because, after all, there are 55 books in the Nag Hammadi library. There are hundreds of apocryphal Christian texts out there. There's a lot. And then, of course, you've got the 66 books and just the Protestant Bible. So of all the scriptures or Gnostic texts, how did you find this one, or why did it speak to you?
Well, I liked it. I happen to, did you have this Marvin Meyer on your show? Wow, he was the editor of this edition. This is a beautiful translation, and I really, really like it. So I certainly read that whole book, as one collected assortment, and it was really the Tripart Tractate, which means three-part book. It was the Tripart Tractate that attracted me. And I happen to like its mythology the best because many of the other books in the Nag Hammadi scriptures seem very much into things like numerology and names and the magic of names and, this and that and the other thing. I am not a person who likes that kind of running down details and piling up names and sorting things out. I am not that kind of detail person. I'm the big view, meta type of view person. And so my PhD is in classical rhetoric. And classical means I know Plato very well, and Aristotle and those old boys, and of course the sophists before them. And so that is all written about the same time as these various scriptures. So I felt quite able to translate what I was reading. I was not at a loss when I was reading this collection of scriptures. And the one thing I like about the Tripartite Tractate is that it's clearly Christian. It's Gnostic Christian. And they use familiar terms that are familiar to Christians: the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. And this idea of aeons, although I'm sure that's what they mean by angels. I don't know why they took the word eons out of the New Testament. That doesn't seem heretical. The whole concept of who the eons are is extremely important, and it's hinted at throughout the Bible, Old Testament and New. So the fact that they stripped out the meaning. So it seems to me that the Gnostic was stripped out of the Bible. That's why you left Christianity at 6 months. I happen to think that if the Gnostic were back into the Bible where it belongs, and okay, here's where I'm a heretic. Here's where, in a different time and place, I'm about to be burned at the stake. Pardon me, God forbid. However, I happen to think that my book belongs right between the Old Testament and the New Testament. This here is what was taken out of the gospel.
Right.
This is what makes it make sense to people like you. And my brother Billy, as I mentioned, he's 9 years older than me. He went through his Christian phase, but he's never been a strong, I'm a real literalist. I have no problem believing in magic. I mean, what's wrong with thinking about miracles? What's wrong of thinking of that God is almighty or whatever? I've got no problem with any of that stuff. I've got no problem with virgin birth or resurrection. It's, I'm not the magic one. It's out of my job description. I don't have to do it. But this is what makes sense to people like my brother Bill. So for the very first time, as I was writing this book, and it's taken me about 5 years, I put it down 5 years ago when I read the book, and I made my charts, my Philip K. Dick looking charts of the gospel. I put it down. It was freaking me out because I did not want to associate the fall with logos. And by the way, in the Tripartite Tractate, that's one of the reasons I like it, and I was mentioning the Christian symbology, is that logos is a familiar concept in the New Testament. In the beginning was logos, and logos was with God. That's how the whole thing begins. So we know, and here it was saying it wasn't. I've always felt bad as a female that Eve is supposedly the bad guy in the Bible, and that it was Eve that created sin. That's just really absurd, and it doesn't make any sense at all. So when I read that it was really logos that fell, I'm like, oh my God, no. And so I had to kind of freak out about that for a few years, and I put it down. And then I wrote the book just in the last year. It was a very rough year, much death and things going, I had a hip replacement surgery. My husband died. I mean, one thing after another, all this year. And meanwhile, out comes this book. So, this is at least how I deal with these sorts of things.
Yeah, create something to work it out. And again, we will definitely want to look at the illustrations when you want, Sid. And for the audience who might be asking, the Tripart Tractate, scholarly, it's a Valentinian work. And the wrinkle they have, we were talking about it in email, Sid, and a lot of the other Gnostic Gospels, it's Sophia who has the fall. Exactly. The Tripartite Tractate, this church or community, it's logos. It's the the original reason of God, or this corporate Christ who makes the mistake.
Right, which is actually makes a lot more sense theologically or cosmologically. The fall should be at the highest level. It doesn't make any sense otherwise.
Exactly.
I mean, see, for example, if it were Eve that had really caused the fall, that would be akin to in our own body, instead of us causing the fall, you blame it on your little toe. Come on.
Yes, that is true. You would think divine powers would know that this little mortal, they could telegraph a mistake. So, Vance, are you doing screen sharing for us? Vance says he has taken over the demiurge.
That's the Gnostic Society library, but that's not my stuff. Yeah, but that's it. That's the Nag Hammadi, the Tripartite Tractate. One of the reasons I like the Tripartite Tractate is that it is logos and not Sophia, because when you think about it, in my opinion, being a female, when you say it's Sophia that fell, once again, you're blaming the female.
Blaming the woman, yes, I've heard that.
I don't like that. I would rather blame the male. But you know, this is all stupid anyway, because seriously, there is no sex in heaven. There is no sex up there. That is a mortal, that has to do with yin and yang down here on the planet. It's got nothing to do with up there. And so to say female or male is a misnomer anyway. And by the way, Sophia means wisdom, and logos also means wise knowledge.
Yes, it can. Yes, it can do. I mean, Philo of Alexandria thought of too. But again, it's an interesting wrinkle. And I think I was reading the introduction in Einar Thomason, who's the leading expert in the Valentinians, and I had to laugh because he's talking about the Tripartite Tractate. God, sometimes you trip over that name. I mean, it's something the scholars made up. I don't think that it's not even in the text. Somebody said, well,
it's not.
It's a fancy name for there's three books.
Right.
So, but he said, when he describing the aliens, he said, "Oh, well, they're just geometry and arithmetics." And I'm like, "Oh no, that's why Sid likes it, because that's part of your philosophy. You know, a simple explanation of everything, how everything, the holographic, everything's fractal."
Yes, everything's fractal. Everything's fractal, and I think that it turns out that and your audience understands what that means. Everything's fractal.
Probably explain, because sometimes I forget.
It's the idea that, like with broccoli, if you go to my YouTube site, there's a broccoli demonstration. You take an ordinary stalk of broccoli and you pull off one of those flowers. It looks exactly like the bigger one in your hand. And then you put the big one down, you take that one and you pull off one of its flowers. It looks exactly like the big one in the hand. And if they're misshapen, they're still going to look just like that first mother clone. Cauliflower is the same way. Anyway, you can get an ordinary broccoli and ordinary cauliflower down to 7 iterations of fractals, meaning the little one looks just like the bigger one. Many flowers are that way. I often post on my blog pictures of flowers, or like dillweed. You know, it looks like this firework explosion. And then when you look closer, each one of those little explosion tips is a little firework. And then you look closer and it's a little firework. And it turns out it goes down 5 iterations, just an ordinary dillweed explosion. Anyway, so that's what a fractal is. So here's what I think. I think, imagine that let's just imagine for a minute that there is such a thing. Let's postulate that there is such a thing as the universal consciousness, as the matrix. Both my simple explanation and I believe certainly the way I'm interpreting the Tripartite Tractate, that the matrix, the Father, the God above all gods, is consciousness, but it's that still, there's nothing to do kind of consciousness. I mean, what's it mean to be omniscient when there's nothing to know? There's nothing to see, nowhere to go. The reason there's eternity is because there's no space. There's no sense of time. So when a thought arose, I believe I'm translating that as the Son, what is generally referred to as the Son of God. And this is the way the cosmology goes. Hey, we could show pictures. You want to show a picture now?
Pictures. Let me do my screen share. And Vance, let me make sure that I'm doing it right. Let's see, where's screen share? Yeah, now I lost.
Okay.
Oh, share. There you go. I am sharing. Everybody see this?
Yeah.
I closed all my pinups of Sophia and Barbalo and Ellen, but I think I did. So let's get this.
Oh, there we go.
All right. Yeah. So this is Sid's book, The Gnostic Gospel, illuminated, not illustrated.
Right.
But it is both. So we'll get started. This is your cover, so you can describe, and whenever you want, tell me to move on to the next slide.
Well, this is what we're looking at on the cover is heaven. It's the end result. It's the final economy. This is what everybody's all worried about. I think it looks like a party hat. It should be the Pope's party hat. You know how these guys like the big hats. This is the one. This is the very hat. Well, the very bottom is what is referred to as the deficiency or the imitation, I think, in all Gnostic texts. That's that blue part. The green is how I am depicting earth, so to speak, or life. Second order powers is what they're called in the Gnostic gospel. just above that, those little yellow rosettes, those are the third order powers. Those are the good guys that get their halos. And then just above that, the very top, that's the eons, that's the angels, that's the fullness, the pleroma. And then the king, the crown, is the Christ, which brought it all together into one economy. And in my opinion, this is a very holy and hallowed thing. It's hard for me as a Gnostic Christian to reconcile why ordinary Protestant Christians that I've spoken to about this think it's so horrible, because to me, this is it. There's your golden crowns ringing around the throne and all that business. It's right there.
Exactly. It is beautiful, and it shows you the pre-creation myth, how the mind of God came about and all that, and how, and again, it makes more sense than, like you said, a talking snake and a bad woman, a naughty woman.
Well, see, that and that all is just another myth. Those all are fractals.
Right, exactly.
See, so my thought is this. Let's just staying on this picture for a minute. Let's imagine that is really what reality looks like, and that we're all
party hat,
so to speak. It looks like this party hat, and we're swimming around in the green down there, or maybe you're sitting around, maybe one of the good guys gets to sit up there in the little gold things. This is, well, now I lost my train of thought because I was thinking about the little gold guys. Never mind.
All right. Well, before we go to
move on.
Verse, Vince, does the audience have a question, or do you have a question or comment before we start with the slides?
I was wondering where all the harps were, but
they're up there.
They play good music.
Okay.
They only play Barry Manilow in the pleroma. So
yeah, someone remarked it looked like the pyramid, a pyramid from a $1 bill. And they got the eye.
Right. It looks just like that. It looks just like that. By the way, I didn't come at any of this in the typical scholarly way. This is not as a result of research. It's all I did was read that unillustrated, text over there from Marvin Miller and Meyer. And this is, I tend to see things. This is the way it became depicted. It's just the clear
your
story.
Vision of it.
It's the vision. It's my vision.
Right.
And also coming after the simple explanation of absolutely everything, which is my earlier book, my methodology is to read the original text. I don't read interpretations. I don't cobble together other scholars' academic opinions.
Right.
I don't care what they think. I'm a very good scholar. I read the originals. I've always done and I'm the A student. So I've always done my homework. I get the A's. I don't need to read what your thought is. So I just did my best job with the simple explanation, and then with this it's not a generalization, it's a simplification in the best possible way. I've gone up to the more meta level, which means to peel away the particulars. It's Plato's idea of cupness, for example. What is a cup? When I use the word cup, everybody thinks of cup. Well, we're all thinking of a cup, but my cup's a little different in my head than your cup is in your head. But yet we're expressing cupness. Cupness is the meme that we're sharing. And so I try to write everything that I do at this Platonic level, so that then anyone that happens to believe a certain way, because honestly, did you notice this, Miguel, when you were reading both the simple explanation, it's the secular version, but the Gnostic gospel, these are very ecumenical. You could be an Orthodox anything and still appreciate this gospel, it seems to me, if you weren't, oh my God, the emperor said, don't read this book. It's like people are still following the emperor and the pope, please.
No, it's great. And like you said, it's almost common sense if you were to think how consciousness began and how things moved out and how things started. And you really do find this story in Hinduism and so many other systems. So you
That's
just put it
because I just keep putting them up. And the simple explanation is a meta religion, so to speak, or a meta cosmology. This is actually a subset of. This is just another one of the religions, but it works equally well for all of the religions and everything, politics, science, chemistry. It's quite an extraordinary claim I make. But you saw it, you read it.
Yes, I did. It was logical. It was sensible, and we'll get it. Well, why don't we start with the first slide here?
All right, go ahead.
And here's the first slide. And
so this is how
guy?
And this is the sun. I'm depicting consciousness emerging out of no consciousness. It's consciousness was all plain and black, like around the edges there. And then when I had a thought, that's what this is. This is that thought emerging, because that's how it would have to be. This is the first differentiation, but it's vague, it's vaporous, it's very indistinct, but it exactly is a fractal of the Father that surrounds us. Pardon my patriarchal terms. It's the way I learned. I'm so sorry. But the Father's outside of it, and then the Son is like a bucket of water sitting in the ocean still. Okay, next.
So he's basically the first thought of the Father. He is
first thought. He is differentiation.
The experience of consciousness.
Yes, they thought that just the differentiation, the first separation. You always start in Taoism, you start with the one.
Right.
There's the matrix, and then there's the one before it becomes the two.
Good analogy. All right, so we go to the next slide, and then
because the very second that the sun was manifested, well, it had all the properties of the Father, which is all that omniscience and omnipotence and creativity. So obviously it's not going to just sit there. Okay, next slide. It became like the rays of a sun. It was the all. This is it, and this is how it's described in the Tripartite Tractate, that the first differentiation out of the sun, the moment the sun realized himself, he realized himself in all of his particular glories. Those are particularities. They will become the eons, but for the moment, they are merely omniscient characteristics and differentiation. So it's not just math, but it's also personalities, it's up, down, it's everything that an omniscient God would know, splayed out and shooting out like rays into nothingness. Next. The second, and then the Tripartite Tractate, it just keeps rolling. It's so cute. The second, the rays were made, they named themselves in order to know themselves. So each one of those rays, it's no longer just a spoke on the central wheel of the sun. It knew itself and named itself. I'm up. I'm strange. I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm the everything out of an omniscience of knowledge, all knowledge that could ever theoretically postulate to be. I mean, that's just our given of our thing. By the way, this is sophism at its best, the way I do this stuff. Anyway, they named themselves. And the minute they named themselves, they were no longer attached to the wheel. And you know how, have you ever seen on those little YouTube videos of the inside of a cell, how those little proteins start out stringy and then they roll up?
Right, yeah.
They rolled up.
So now we have all these cells, the DNA of the mind of God, basically.
Yes, looking just like that. Okay, next.
And it should be mentioned in the Valentinian systems, there's 30 aeons, but in this one, it's countless.
No, right? it's infinity.
Okay, infinity aspect, infinity aeons. Okay,
that's right.
To the next slide.
And there they are. I call this the aeonic migration. And because what happened again, and this is all just taking time, it's timeless out there. This is all before time. This is eternity, but things are starting to happen. So now something's happened. The second the eons named themselves, why, heck, they had to sort themselves. Because don't we always do that? Don't you walk into a classroom and everybody gets sorted right away? The second you name yourself, and particularize yourself away from everybody else, you're going to obviously figure out who you belong with and who you're above and who you're below, and you sort yourselves. Okay, so next slide. And the word they use is hierarchy. There's that pyramid. There's that golden pyramid. They created the hierarchy. The moment they named themselves, they sorted themselves. And some are greater than others. Some are higher than others. Donald Trump would think, for example, he's at the very top. That's why all the gold. But the little guy's down at the bottom. So the way I think about this, I really have been coming to think, and this is a very weird thought, but metaphorical, let's just say. You know, I really think that the eons sit there in a hierarchy like this as kind of like a slime mold, because they're still of one accord. It says they sorted themselves and they named themselves, but everybody loved them. They loved themselves. They loved their neighbors. They loved their place in the hierarchy. This is just a pile of love sitting here. There's no troubles. This is heaven. This is perfection. They love where they are. There was no envy. It was just perfect. And so I think this is the pattern of the eons. I think the higher, the fewer. And this is also in the simple explanation of absolutely everything, which predates this sorting. Those little guys, all those guys down at the base, that is not those are not peons. Those are right on top of quantum foam. Those are particles and atoms. And then they just are going to build the universe from the bottom on up. It's as if that thought that God had, that now here we are with this slime mold pile of aeonic consciousness, all happy and love each other. And they all think of one accord. They only have one thought, see?
Fascinating.
They have no differentiation.
Right. They're still the Borg, maybe?
Yes, like the Borg, but without a leader. It's really just love. It's more like a slime mold.
Okay.
I
This
keep
holy
saying
slime mold.
You're
All
gonna
right.
have to look up slime molds. Am I making sense?
Yes, no, it makes perfect sense. Yes.
You can go ahead and.
All right, next slide. Uh-oh.
Okay, so here, so this is the crown of creation. This is the last eon that was made. And all the Gnostic Gospels talk about it like this, right? But they just give that guy at the top a different name necessarily. Now, keep in mind, there's no sex, so it doesn't matter if it's a he or a she. I used he because that's the way they talk about it, and I think right on. Let's not blame the female for a change. So the deal about Logos is that you see, he looks just like the whole pyramid, all in himself. He was perfection in himself. He knew everything that everybody else knew. He was like the architect, or he was like the library, you know, the Library of Alexandria. He was like the DNA. He knew everything that everybody else knew, because he was the Borg leader then. Okay, he knew what everybody's job was, but he didn't order them around. It's just that he was the best. He was their best and brightest. He was their child. He was the last eon produced. And they loved this eon. They doted on this eon. They gave this eon every gift that they possessed. So the eon forgot that it was just one eon out of that whole pile of eons.
Now the Logos is different than the sun, than this first thought.
Yes,
because obviously when you read the Gospel of John, the Logos and the Son of God are one and the same, and the fleshy.
Yes, perhaps that way, but I believe that's just been a misinterpretation. Oh, because you know me, I can interpret the Bible, right? This picture you're looking at implies that the sun is still there, because it's got this kind of foggy halo behind it.
Oh yes, okay. I see it. Yeah.
So this is the fullness, the pleroma emerging from the sun, but the sun is still sitting there as its own entity. He is the Father. This is his fruit. So this is a fractal. This is now he was the first fractal. Each one of these guys is a fractal of him. And in the simple explanation of absolutely everything, I say that every unit of consciousness is a fractal of the whole shebang, but it only needs to express its job.
Wonderful. And for those who will be listening in audio, we have a pyramid of the blobby aeon cells, and then you've got a smaller pyramid on top, which is the Logos. Behind it, you've got like a giant gray shimmering halo, which is the sun. And all of this is really the Father in fractals.
That's right. That's right. And in fact, it's the infinity of potential of fractals. Okay, you can turn the page.
Okay.
Because I think the next one is this. Oh yeah, this is it. This one I call the fullness streams of paradise. And I borrowed this image. This was originally on the wall of the Epcot Center at Disneyland in the 1980s. And I give credit to it in my book and on the blog, but in my head, I don't remember. But it's a cute picture of paradise. It's my idea of paradise because I like it because there's people and there's flying spaceships and there's dogs and cats and flowers and trees.
Yeah.
Anyway, so here's my thought. That the eons are sitting there in this kind of slime mold pile, all in love. Everything's happened. The fall hasn't occurred yet. This is all perfection still. This is all the mind of God expressed in the eons. And they're singing one song. And it said that they dreamed of paradise with one accord. So I'm putting it up there, that paradise in a thought bubble, whatever you know how the, the doorbell ringers come and they give you the pamphlets, and they also often have pictures of paradise or of heaven or of Eden. All right.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's an archetype. It's this archetypal vision of what now we call paradise. I'm saying that it's really their vision. And what we are is the fallen version of a paradise that is imagined in its beauty and fullness in the fullness. And this is hinted at in the Bible all over the place, but they stripped it out. It's right there. Anyway, so I think this is a lovely thought, because I think we can think of, in a practical sense then, that we can think of the hierarchy of the fullness as being expressed in our own personal bodies, that the little guys, that's your cells and whatnot that are holding everything together, your organ systems, it's all hierarchical. It's always the higher, the fewer, the more sophisticated an aggregation of consciousnesses are. Like in your body, you start out at the elemental level, and you build up and up and up. Everything gets fewer of them until there's just, 9 major organs or 11 major organs, whatever. And then finally your brain's one of them. And then there's you're just the one sitting at the top, just like Logos here.
Right.
So
and
we
my
are a
nose doesn't
fractal representation of this.
Right. My nose doesn't think it's superior to my toes or something. We're all
No,
just
we're all working together. Your body is devoting itself to instantiating you, to keeping you alive. And it's possible that we really don't look any different than this pile here.
Right.
I mean, if you're a true idealist, you don't necessarily believe in materialism. But my cosmology is ecumenical enough to allow people to believe whatever their particular is, because whatever their particular is, I'm sure that one of those infinities, it's their vision of paradise too. So then all the souls, everybody's going to go on up there at one of these points. So that's what we got going. Okay, next.
Awesome. Next slide. Ooh, things get dark.
This is Logos forgets the all. Because Logos so replicated so perfectly the fullness, Logos mistook himself for the all. It's as if the head of the corporation mistook himself for everybody that worked for him, so to speak, or the head of a country or something like that. There's always one guy at the top. It's just the way it is. Sorry, it's just the way it is. Anyway,
like
there
Zuckerberg and Facebook, right?
Exactly. And then he thinks his will is the will of everybody else. So now we are getting into quasi-Christian territory, because I'm very familiar with this story, but it was never put as clearly as it is in the Tripartite Tractate, which I then really made a lot simpler, or else you wouldn't just be reduced to the stories, right? Oh, and by the way, if any of you fans out there would like to animate this whole series for me, I really could use an animator. All right, that's fun, huh? All right. Anyway, so he forgot himself. And he thought he was the all. Okay, he launches himself into outer space because he thinks he can act unilaterally, and that was the sin. That's the original sin. Breaking from harmony to unilateral, selfish, egoic motivation. In fact, it's called presumptuous thought. That's what they call it in the Tripartite Tractate. His sin, the original sin, wasn't Eve handing Adam an apple, whether or not that's metaphorical in any sense.
Right.
It's ego consciousness. It's that he said, hey, I'm pretty hot. Sayonara. And he launched himself up thinking he could complete the agenda on his own. He thought he could build paradise on his own. The paradise dreamed of the fullness. He had all the blueprints. It's like
they're all within him.
It's like someone embezzling. It's like, an architect embezzling, some plans for something and stealing away. Okay, so he reached for the fullness on his own, and then he fell.
Yeah, as above, so below. These are lessons for our daily lives.
Now, are you enjoying? Do you want to keep spending time doing all this, going through the illuminations?
Yes,
You liking this?
yeah.
Okay.
We can pause for a second. Vance, any questions from the audience or yourself?
Not really. I'm not sure the audience is understanding what this is, or whatever, but there's a lot of side discussions. But
There are always, there's always big conversations.
But
are they respectful side conversations?
Depends on your definition. most
Good.
of them
protect me. I'm delicate.
Well, yeah, most of them are talking about other stuff. There's a couple of people that I see aren't following it, but okay. Dr. Rosemary understands and respects.
Thank you, Dr. Rosemary.
It's very normal. People, once they get into their conversations, but
because, by the way, Miguel, the insecurity. Because here's the thing: you understand, academics don't like me at all. I have 2 master's degrees and PhDs, all from major institutions. Mm-hmm. I'm so weird. I'm just, nobody respects my work. But for the Christians don't like me because I've taken this Gnostic turn. The secularists don't like me because I'm way too religious. The materialists certainly don't like me, and I'm no friend of science.
I think this is great. I mean, again, I never the Tripartite Tractate never really spoke to me, but after reading your book and seeing these visuals, now it really makes makes perfect sense how it is. Again, it's logical. So let's get to the next slide here, and then
okay. So he was reaching for back to the Father. He was trying to replug back into the original. And that's him falling down there at the bottom. It's a picture of Logos on his head. He's all cracked, and he's got bad things happening.
So this is basically, in Christianity, this would be called the fall of Satan. But in this one, it's fall of Logos outside of the mind.
Right. And the deal is, that's a very heretical thing to say, to equate in any sense the word Logos and the word Satan.
Mm-hmm.
But of course they did that. I'm sure Clement did that. I'm sure that the emperor and the Pope did that. I doubt it because, well, anyway, carry on.
So he has this presumptuous thought, and Logos leaves the pleroma, and then he falls. He falls out of grace, and he falls away from. He doesn't return to the pleroma. Okay, next. I don't know where he went. Oh, and he breaks apart. He shatters. And the words that they use to describe the shattered Logos, they're just tragic. They're just heartbreaking. They're well, first off, this is the shadow. And by the way, Jung was a Gnostic, and he had one of these gospels. He had one of the first translated the Gospel of Truth.
Yes. So which I feel as though he kind of plagiarized his whole psychotherapeutic model, because the archetypes and whatnot. Anyway, this is the shadow. This is the birth of the shadow. And literally what it is, it's every quality that was of that in the original slide where we showed the eons of the fullness before they sorted themselves, back when they were up there in that kind of corpuscular form and they looked like cells. It's every one of those characteristics inversion, or literally shadow. It's the negative of everything, every quality of God. Well, that is a very bad thing.
Yeah. So, for example, happiness becomes sadness.
Right.
Bravery becomes fear, all that. It's the opposite. It's bizarro world here.
It's bizarro world. And I have a little 2-page spread in my book where I pulled out of my own little head these polarities. Those are called dialectics or polarities. And so, when you look at it, it becomes such a prosaic, like, little school child do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts, do's and don'ts. But that's also a funny thing about profound maxims. The truth looks ridiculously simple when you finally find it. Don't you agree? It's never so complicated that somebody can't get it. The truth is simple. It's the lies that are cumbersome.
All right, so we have Logos falls into the darkness.
He falls into darkness, and he shatters.
Turns into a shadow. Everything that he is opposite now.
Right. Everything's ugly in Bizarro world. Okay, so turn.
Yes. Okay.
And then Logo. Oh, there he is. Okay, yeah, we got that. Leave that.
Mm-hmm.
That's just showing that is the shattered.
Oh, that is shadow logo. Okay, and then
he's sending out the deficiency. Okay, so Logos fled the deficiency and horror, and I think I read that in some of the other Gnostic Gospels as well. Even when they flee,
right.
They split because. Mm-hmm. The good qualities can't look upon. Well, it's just like we're just talking about shadows and light. We're talking about yin and yang. That's all. Mm-hmm. Light dispels darkness. That's just what happens. And so darkness cannot coexist with light. So the light leaves. So the Logos leaves and returns to the fullness. It escapes. The good guy, chagrined, like Tiger Woods 10 years ago, slinks off into the shadows.
Right.
Leaving behind the chaos of the fallen reputation and all the lost endorsements.
And this is our universe.
And this is our universe. And
here we are. Yay.
And you recognize it, right? So now it's the God, and it says in the tractate. Why don't you just call it the tractate from now on?
Yes, please, because I'm
tractate. Just call it tractate.
Tractate.
That's it. Tractate. We got it. It said that the second that Logos withdrew in horror, just horror at what had been created from his presumptuous thought, he repented, in other words. He's like, oh my God, no. And haven't we all, now think of your own life as a fractal. Haven't we all had similar falls?
Mm.
This is a fractal of our own lives. I made fun of Tiger, but his disgrace was so public.
Right.
Everyone has some kind of horrible, disgraceful fall. And then they retreat in horror and go, okay, I'm really sorry about that. I really, really wish I could take it back. So that is the condition of our universe when it's called the deficiency. God threw up a boundary around it. It said God threw up a boundary around the deficiency to contain the illness that had been created. It's to protect heaven. It's to protect the fullness from the deficiency.
Does he call it, in some Valentinians, it's called the horos? Does he just call it the boundary in this text?
Well, they just called it the boundary.
Okay.
And of course, it's interesting because the simple explanation, which I wrote 10 years ago, which was well before getting into the Gnostic Gospels at all, my universe has a boundary as well, although it's the toroidal boundary. It's a toroidal.
Right.
But you have to have the boundary. It's got to be a bounded universe in order to have time, in order to have space, in order to have position.
Very true.
In my opinion.
Yeah. All right. So we go to the next slide, and now.
All right. So here we are. Meanwhile, back in the fullness, their little dream of paradise has been ruined by this big crap on the floor down there, and so they dream up. They turn to the Father, they ask for help, and they dream up a new fruit to add to the mixture in the deficiency in order to ameliorate the horror of the deficiency. See, because all that was down there at first was chaos. And if I were equating this to physics, and I take that sort of license all the time, I would say that this state of the deficiency is quantum foam.
Quantum foam, never heard of it.
Quantum foam is the smallest level of matter in the normal particle physics model. It's the smallest piece, just under the subatomic particles. It's smaller than quarks and so forth. And at that level of material instantiation, which is just above the vibratory level of sound, that quantum foam level is entirely chaotic. It's described as chaotic. It's completely chaotic, which I keep saying over and over. Okay, but it's the way that the imitation is described. It was chaos. That word was used. That the imitation, the deficiency that's in the boundary, is pure chaos, unable to build anything, not able to work together, because it didn't come from the fullness. It came out of an egoic, presumptuous thought.
No.
So it was all about me, me, me. It came out of ego. So everybody's in it for themselves down there. There's no working together. There's no vision. There's no light. There's no love. It's the inverse of the paradise up there in the fullness. And so they want to make it better because they really want to reclaim. They actually want to eventually suck the deficiency back up, make it all better, and put it back up in the fullness, as anybody would. They're just trying to clean up the mess. So that's what they do. They cook up this thing. The next thing, it looks much more like Earth now, or a petri dish of creatures, and that now becomes the second order of powers. The first order of powers is the fullness.
Okay.
The second order of powers is the fruit of the fullness and the Father.
Okay. Next slide.
I hope I'm not getting into too much detail.
No,
yes.
no.
Oh, yes.
Next
slide.
Next slide. Whoa.
Oh, yeah, that's
This
awesome.
is animated.
Here they're coming. Yeah, isn't that cute?
The second powers. This
Yeah,
is like
they're
from
coming
a Star
to
Trek
Earth.
episode.
They're coming to
the
Earth.
first
They're
order power.
Get this. This is a cool thing about the second order of powers. It says in the tractate that it was decided. That's cute. It was decided. Like, who decided? I don't know who decided. It must have been an agreement of the pleroma.
Right.
It was decided that the powers had to come in one by one, from the smallest to the largest, taking as much time as it would take. It says it just like that. It couldn't be more clear. This is the instantiation of life on Earth. I am equating the second order powers with the eukaryotes. We got your prokaryotes was part of the imitation. The eukaryotes, which is all life on Earth, both the flora and the fauna, are a kind of.
Took all these aeons, billions of years to come
in, because they had to come in one by one. That's what evolution is. It's not it's evolving in the sense that, yes, it's instantiating the eons of the fullness through their child, the fruit of the second order, and it had to come in one by one, from the cellular on up to us. We are apparently, for some reason, see, in many of the Gnostic Gospels, they do talk about the first Adam. You're familiar with what's called the first Adam, right?
Yeah.
Okay, the first Adam, I believe, is the prototypical human. That's us.
Right.
Only it was up there. It was cooked up. It was part of the dream of the paradise of the fullness. So imagine that these guys that really look like these corpuscular slime molds sitting in this big golden jelly thing, that they're dreaming this beautiful, meet George Jetson kind of paradise, and everything's alive and beautiful, and there's dogs and cats and there's flowers, and there's nothing bad up there. There's no death or destruction, because they hadn't dreamed it up. This is not a dream of the eons. This was a result of the shadows cast from the fall. It was not their intention. Although it's interesting that the writer of the tractate did cut Logos some slack, which then you might say cuts Satan some slack, because they said you can't, and by the way, it makes the fractal story of Judas Iscariot betraying Christ and being the bad guy in the fall, and he had a big fall, that was just them fractally representing the fall. That it's all the negative things. So these guys have to come in one at a time. We come up to the first Adam. He's the guy up there that's all cooked up in paradise. The eons didn't invent it. We're not a product of that. We are what's called living images. We humans are called living images of the fullness above. So they do look like us, but they have no substantiation. They are immaterial. apparently they wanted to have the experience of, eating food and having sex and walking around. But apparently up in paradise, we can all fly. I mean, we all know what paradise is like. Oh, sorry. We can fly, we can, whatever we want happens. All of our loved ones are there. All your dogs are with you again. We all know what paradise is.
There you go. We have a feeling. Right. Yes.
Carry on.
So they created the second order.
And they had to send them in one at a time. And that is what we have experienced over the past 4.5 billion years as evolution. Yeah. But it's not. It's intelligent design recreating the fullness. Recreating the paradise on Earth.
Yeah, the ants go marching, hurrah. It's the aeons go marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah, until there is I guess they're looking for another singularity, right?
Well, the singularity then would be the Christ coming down.
Right, bingo.
So carry on.
Okay, now we have another animation.
Okay, now this is a funny thing. And by the way, on my screen, it's all kind of squashed. They should be circular, but on mine, it looks like an ellipse. Does yours? It's pretty funny.
No, it looks like an egg.
Yeah, it should be kind of rounder.
Yeah, it's elliptical. I don't suppose
it matters.
Yeah.
But anyway, you can see the yin and yang. So I've got the green guys on the right are the second order powers, and the blue meanies on the left are those of the imitation, the phantoms, the demons. And I think there was life on Earth before the second order powers. It's only the archaea, the prokaryotes, which is bacteria. Mm-hmm. And before the prokaryotes were viruses, because viruses aren't even alive, so they don't belong to any phylum or order, Mm-hmm. Do you realize viruses are just molecular assemblages?
Yeah, it's like it's like in the Kabbalah, the Kelepoth, they're just wasted shards of reality.
That's all they are.
And material. Some say that's what the archons are, these soulless machines that have no purpose.
They're and they are replicants, though, of all the angels. So for every archangel, there's an archon. And for every, principle, maybe antimatter, for all I know, is
yeah, you might be right. Yeah.
I'm not sure, because they're like, where's all the antimatter? But anyway, so the funny thing happened to the second order powers when they find themselves on Earth, and there's only one sin. There is only one sin. It's that presumptuous thought and wrath, and then wrath. Because whenever somebody doesn't agree with me, oh man, do I get mad about it. It's like that. I mean, there's really only two things. It's ego and anger. Otherwise, we'd all be loving each other. We'd all be hand in hand building the next level up. So what happened was, here you are being birthed into the pea soup of the primordial sea, and there's suddenly all these bacteria and these viruses trying to kill you. And so right off the bat, you've got to kill for survival. It's a dog-eat-dog world down here. It's called the economy. It's a sad reality. It's like, why do we have to eat? Vegetarians and vegans don't want to eat meat because they want to respect life. But hey, I got news for you. Carrots are alive too.
They are indeed. Plants are.
I really have a great respect for the entire planet. And it's a tragedy to eat.
Everything eats everything. Yeah. To survive, we must cause suffering on others.
It is. And that's of the imitation. Because in paradise, you're not eating anybody, Nope. Nobody's eating anybody in paradise. That's part of the imitation. So it's this dog-eat-dog world. And because of their wrath and because of being locked in endless war, and by the way, since I put this up on my website about, a while ago, and did an article called Endless War, I actually got a hit from, I think, a government agent looking to make sure I wasn't a terrorist or something, because they praised endless war. And he actually left the
industrial complex. Like this talk of peace and figuring out why they're fighting, because they're ruled by archons at the end of the day.
So at any level, the yin, just to picture the yin and the yang, and one side is the negative imitation, and the other side is the second order powers, which are reflections of the angels above. And if it weren't for the guys we're locked into mortal combat with in this never-ending war, it would be paradise. But we're down here in the imitation, we're fighting for our lives, and we're having to eat the little lambs, and it just sucks. Everything sucks. And that's why Gnostics are often called world haters. Because it's just real. It's reality. Why is everybody so
reality.
Depressed? Please, maybe
we're
everybody's
each
so.
Other, we're fighting each other. We're stuck with all these robots and viruses.
And it's a never-ending war, no matter what myth you're looking at, no matter what level. Everything is a battle. Whether I'm battling with, my friend over who's going to do the barbecue, or whether it's the Republicans and the Democrats, or whether it's the archons and angels.
The fabric of reality
it's part of the thing. We can't help it. It's the basic wheel of karma going around, and we're stuck in it. Oh, we need another savior. Okay, turn the page.
All right, let's have some good news.
Good news. Oh, do you recognize?
Yes.
Praise be to God. This is the Christ. So I am picturing the Christ as a brilliant explosion of light, once again, because the Christ is the instantiation. Now, this is not Jesus. This is before the Jesus.
But he's not the logos either. This is
this is another thing. This is now the fruit. See, this is the full fruit. This guy's got it all. So it's already got the second order power has already been created. So they're taking the blueprint of the second order powers, which I think is the DNA. I think it's literally the DNA double helix matrix of our multicellular organisms. It's taken all that kind of knowledge of what it takes to bring this paradise into Earth, and it is melding it with the Holy Spirit, with the power of being able to create life. Because one thing, and this is in all the Gnostic Gospels, not only the Valentinian, I think, the abortion that was created down there in the deficiency, down there in the imitation from the fall, it was sterile, wasn't it? It doesn't bring life.
No soul. I mean, or it doesn't have a spirit.
It can't generate.
Right. It's not real life. It's fake life.
Yes, and literally they can't procreate. The bacteria can only procreate asexually and by splitting, by splitting. They don't have sex in any form. And forgive me if I'm saying that not exactly right. I'm not a biologist either. But anyway, the Christ has the full blueprint, got all the information, now imbued with the full blessings of the fullness, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. All the mojo has been breathed onto the Christ, and what it is, it's the correction algorithm for creation.
That's a good analogy.
It's
the software is bad, it's faulty software.
It totally is.
This is the algorithm that's going to hopefully fix it.
This is it, because it's based on that first Adam, the perfect DNA plan, or the original program before the fall. Then given the mojo and breathed on, which is another way of saying the breathing on the life and all that. There are many levels, many fractal levels of all the mythologies. But anyway, that's the Christ. And that Christ figure is cooked up there in the fullness. Okay. And it is available as the correcting algorithm. And this is why in the Bible, in the New Testament, and people who are not Christians, they don't understand this aspect because they don't believe it. Because the church, I'm not a church Christian. I've always been an independent Christian. I'm kind of like a mystical Christian. I'm an originalist, right? So only those with eyes can see. The Bible always says that, can see the Christ. Christ came to redeem the world, but there were those who preferred the darkness. It's always put on in these you got to look for the light, That's why my motto for many years has been onward and upward. And that's a sidebar. I read the Tibetan Book of the Dead a few years ago. And if you read that really carefully and at the meta level, it all boils down to onward and upward. That's all you need to know. That's all you need to know. So when you die, when you're going down with your final heart attack, just think onward and upward.
Onward and upward. I'll keep that in mind.
Because just like in the movies, just like in, the movie Ghost, when all the bad ghosts come up, they're always coming from the bottom. The bardos are all down. The evil is always down. That's why getting high means you're getting up. Getting lifted, you're going in the spiritual direction. All right. Anyway, so that's an eyeball down there seeing the Christ. Because you have to willingly accept reprogramming. If we are meat bots, that is our correcting algorithm being sent down from on high.
Yes,
and it will make us happy again. It will give us the keys to paradise.
Yes, the tractate and the They were not universalists. You have to do the work to, as you said, reprogram. Some
you
have
do.
the spirit,
All you have
some
to
have
do is
soul,
repent.
some are
Yeah.
just going to reject Christ.
Well, that's right. But in my version, in the Gospel of Sid, all you have to, eventually everyone is going to be saved, because the light will be undeniable. It'll be undeniable at some point, and it would just be stupid to say no. It's like being given candy and going no. It's stupid. But it takes a longer for some people than others, and I think you're going to be reincarnated over and over and over again until you are ready, until you're done, until you've had it. Okay, the eons that are commingling with your soul and spirit. Because we are a mixture of archetypes, right? There's you sitting at the top, like the Raja, Sid's here, or Miguel is here, or Vance is here, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, carry on. And there it is. So there's the Christ. Oh, that's a little off center. Uh-oh, I can see that needs correcting. Anyway, sorry, lack of perfection on my part. So there it is. And there it is. That's what's called the final economy. That's what everything's trying for. Once all of the second order powers have had enough of Showtime and HBO and Food Channel and whatever, right? See, I think there's a lot of depression because people really are fed up with this. Because it really is the imitation, and Hollywood's the imitation. Virtual reality's the imitation. My philosophy books they're not my first two books. My first book is called Reality Crash, and that was actually optioned once upon a time as a major motion picture, never made it to screen. It was out there at the same time as Matrix and Truman Show.
No, wow.
Reality Crash was there too, but it didn't get the green light. Anywho, but so this whole idea of virtual reality is the ultimate, where you can't tell reality from or what we call reality. You can't tell it at all from the imitation. The deep fakes now. What's going to happen when we can't trust anything?
Well, we'll be Gnostics. Yeah. That's the whole point. Skeptical about everything, even
That's right. That's right.
All right. Next slide.
Well, that's it. I think that's probably the end.
Okay, so we have Christ rectifying everything, and that was awesome. And what is it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, there it is. And if it's not a triangle, those pyramids are just sections of a circle, so to speak.
Oh, okay.
So that is the fullness in its roundness, which is generally the way things are described, with the throne being at the center and the angels and the archangels ringing around with their golden crowns and all that. And so I think that we're all going to just be living in these paradises that were dreamed of originally, and we've gone through all this experience, and that we're going back to it. Wonderful. But now we've had the experiences that God never would have had it not differentiated. And we will never go down to that Zen zero again. We're not going to be subsumed back to the blackness. This is a forever situation, according to the various scriptures.
I see. All right. We will exit now. So now we're back here. Let me get out of here. Okay, I'll put them in the right place. So I actually have a question, but before I have another question, Vance, do you or the audience have a question, or what do you think?
There have been a lot of discussions in the audience. I don't see any particular questions, but it's kind of hard to formulate a question about the whole creation of the universe, right?
Exactly.
So, where do you start?
Yeah, exactly.
No, and that's the trouble I've always had on my blog, because my Simple Explanation blog's been up for 10 years. So I've only had over 10 whole years. I've only had about 230,000 hits, which ain't bad for such deep philosophy, but I only have 28 followers. I only have 28 followers. Well, and never any comments. Nobody ever comments. So it's like, what do you say? It's like, what are you supposed to say?
I was wondering, what the role of consciousness, what things were conscious, and how, what was the basis of their bodies, if they had bodies, things like that, because there has to be some sort of vehicle that separates the consciousness from the quote unquote outside, right? So all throughout the explanation, I was wondering things like that, but there's so many questions that, I couldn't constantly interrupt with them.
Did you read the Simple Explanation? Did you read the book, The Simple Explanation?
No,
just me. Okay. So here's the notion. See, it's kind of a sign. I'm accepting, but I'm not married to the traditional conventional scientific model, let's say. I subscribe to Science News and I read scientific literature.
The Big Bang and all that, you mean?
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. And kind of traditional chemistry, traditional physics, all that. But I'm not married to it. But the point is, everything in our universe, whether it's a subatomic particle, an atom or molecule, a cell, an organ, a human, a leaf, everything knows how to do its job. Everything knows what it is. It knows what to do. I do not know how to be a leaf, but the leaf does. And the leaf doesn't know how to be me because it's not me. So everything, it's a given. If it's a knowledge, I believe that consciousness has differentiated and we are each fractals of the entire plan. We've all got, theoretically, the whole algorithm. It's just that it's a need-to-know basis. So we, each instantiation, whether it's a molecule or a protein or a cell or an organism, it has a unit of consciousness that carries the logos, that carries the book with it. Maybe in the form of DNA. It's possible that the whole code's written in the DNA. I'm kind of leaning that way.
Yeah, I like that idea about the fractals. And, what I always think of is that even at the fundamental particle level, quarks and atoms, let's say the laws of the universe, they seem to be spread out everywhere, that they don't belong in any particular location.
Right.
So that's the basic knowledge. And then things like us, you could say, are constructed by all these little arrangements of this stuff. But
exactly,
precisely.
And I'm saying that the consciousness never leaves any of those levels. That's a hierarchy. It never leaves any of those levels because the atoms have to keep knowing what the atom's supposed to do. Oh my God, it's supposed to be holding on here because he's part of this molecule. The molecule has to know what he's supposed to do because, oh my God, he's part of this protein structure. And, it's like that. Everything knows its job. Everything knows how to, so there has to be a unit of knowledge. It's a given. I mean, it's self-evident, in my opinion. Don't you think it's self-evident, Miguel, that every structure in the universe knows how to be itself? Because there it is, doing its job.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like Philip K. Dick says, everything's information. It's it is the information. It is the knowledge. So when you're talking about consciousness, are you meaning just that knowledge, or are you meaning the self-reflective feedback circular notion of I know that I'm conscious?
No, it's not that. It's not that. No, because because I attribute consciousness. I suppose you could say I'm a what is that word, pantheist or something? I don't know. I attribute consciousness, and this is why I think this is a really godly type of theology, to everything. Even the rocks and stones themselves would start to sing, Hosanna, Hosanna, right? Exactly. Everything is conscious, everything. But the aggregates, like a rock, a stone may not have a unit of consciousness attached to the stone because the stone doesn't really have a job. The job is the guys just below it. It's the elemental level, and they're holding on to be that rock. But the rock's just sitting there. So, and that's where the fallen couldn't procreate. That's where the second order powers brought life. This is when the DNA came to Earth and brought the ability to procreate. The whole cell structures and the whole sexual thing all came on the second order powers, but they had to come one at a time.
I think I see a couple of questions there, Vance. Do you see them too?
I see question marks, but I don't see any. Let's see. They're talking about various things.
Oh, are they talking within themselves? I thought I saw Angelica and Rosemary with questions.
Maybe it scrolled off. Let's see. Message retracted. I don't see it, mate. But I'm busy talking. So when I'm busy talking, I'm not busy watching the chat.
I have actually felt it to be a blessing. The way I rationalize my lack of responses on my blog, is that it's a blessing. At least people aren't snarking me,
You're gonna have to take
well,
the
we
bad.
had one.
No, I can't take the bad.
Yeah,
I'm thin-skinned.
No, it's okay. I just told the person that, it's distraction, is interference. If
here we have a question by Rosemary, our friend Rosemary. Is she trying to access a nonverbal acquisition of information by the quote reader?
Yes, certainly. Sure. I think you could understand that gospel without reading any lines and without seeing any captions. Sure. And the book itself, it's about half the page is taken up with the picture, isn't it, Miguel? I mean, I reduced that whole thing down to about 50 pages, and half of them are pictures. So, because I wanted it to be accessible, I am trying to reintroduce the gospel, the true gospel. I think this is what Jesus and John the Baptist were preaching. I don't think Jesus came and said, look, worship me. I'm the Son of God. I want you to build all these edifices to me. And then I want you to hang me up on the crosses. And every Sunday, I want people to worship me and sing songs about me and how great I am. Well, that just doesn't sound like, the Son of God. That doesn't sound right.
And of course, it should be mentioned, even though it's not on the slides, but in the tractate, Jesus does come in the flesh.
Yes, he does. But I'm
crucified, and we go into the traditional Christian story.
You do, and that's kind of in the third tractate. I think that might have been kind of tacked on there at the end. It might easily be called a two-part tractate without that last part. But it is not an overstretch to read the coming of Christ as the coming of Christ really actually incarnating, the Christ figure incarnating, that was the Holy Spirit that impregnated Mary, and that the God, fully God, entwined with the fully man in the DNA caduceus sense. And that is Jesus. And he was like the most perfect person. And he is often described as first Adam incarnate. So that's what we have. That's how first Adam incarnated. And he wasn't magical or special then. He just never lost his absolute connection. He was fully conscious all the time of the fullness and the Father. But we are, in a sense, fractals in that manner as well. We are all representations of the fullness.
I like that fractal analogy. That's good. We did have another question earlier, which is a simple one, which is when you were talking about up and down, like in the Tibetan Book of the Dead.
Yeah.
The question from Angelica was, well, what if we're disoriented and we don't know up from down? How would you get reoriented? That
because the fear is down. So if you were in a bardo and you were disoriented, here's what you need to do. Trust me. Up is the direction towards the light. There's always a light. There's always an up. So imagine you being tumbled. You've been out surfing and you got totally tumbled and you're down under the water. If you open your eyes, there is a direction that's more light than dark. So that is up. But also, if you're being chased by demons or and these demons, by the way, these are
go the other way.
Well, the demons are down below. They are because they're of the past. They're your karma. They're your unresolved karmic burdens or your regrets. Let's say that those demons down there are your regrets. That's in the past. That's dead and gone. So that's obviously down. So if you're looking or thinking about the past and regrets, it's always onward and upward, onward and upward. That will always reorient you back to the fullness and the Father.
Yeah, I don't know if the past is actually gone. I'm going to a wedding tomorrow with a big family, and I can assure you the past is going to be alive and well, because there'll be some fights, there'll be some issues. So
it's the endless war.
The demons will be out as much as the aeons will be at the wedding.
That's right. That's right.
Awesome. And wanted to move a little bit towards your book, A Simple Explanation of Everything for the reader. For the audience, I would certainly recommend both books. The beginning, of course, when I started reading the beginning, it was the Gnostic Gospel Illuminated, but different words, different concepts, but exactly, again, these are parallel works.
Right.
And but the part I really wanted to talk about, which I enjoyed, and you spend quite a bit of energy, and it's relevant for today's audience, is that of a meme. As you call them, they are energetic waves of cultural information patterns. Tell us more about memes, Sid. Most people think they are nice cartoons or funny,
Yeah.
jokingly images. But of course, we know it was who was this? God, who was
Dawkins.
it? Yeah, Dawkins. Yeah,
That
the mind
atheist,
virus.
that
Yes.
atheist Dawkins.
Yeah, but it was a great idea how he started.
Right. So, well, yeah, he came up with the word meme
Mhm.
as a play on the word genes. So Dawkins was, he believed he was going to do away with God uh, and replace God with just showing that sociology would explain everything, that it can all be explained at the humanistic level. And so he was saying that these notions we have, that these are memes, and that they are like any exchange of information, that they're genes, they're genetic, they build stories, but they're can be given to each other, that we walk around with a bundle of memes. I like to think of it as like, you know how in the tarot deck, there's that guy carrying that big stack of rods on his back, the 10 of rods or whatever. That's your meme bundle. That's your karma. That's everything you believe in. Everything you believe is true, for good or for ill, you are carrying it around with you. It is like your meme shroud. It's your meme. It's the bushel basket hiding your pure rays of God. See, it's the most of it is the imitation, because if it's a good thing, it's not a meme. Anyway, I'm off the topic. So meme being simply another word for cupness, as we were saying. It's the meta level of communication. So I think every piece of information that we can exchange, whether it's a single word or a concept, whether it's an object, a noun, it doesn't matter, whether it's an aggregation or even a whole bundle of thoughts like America, or Christianity, these gigantic things. They're just gigantic sacks of memes. And you either carry that sack around with you or you don't. And people that agree with each other, their meme bundles are very much overlapping. And when you disagree with someone, you don't share the same meme bundles, and that causes mistrust and lack of communication. So anyway, so memes is the basic unit of informational exchange. And I think that DNA is certainly, like I'm saying, the meme of, well, certainly the meme of any organism is its DNA. It's there, it is, it is written. All the expressions of that organism is that meme of that DNA of that creature unfolding at the meme level. Anyway, so the transpersonal consciousness that Jung talked about, transpersonal consciousness, I believe in. I think it's like you have your own thoughts that you feel are within your brain, but we share a hive mind called the transpersonal consciousness. We second order powers do. And it's kind of a leftover. It's an attribute of the all, because they're a slime mold, basically. They are a hive mind. So we second order powers came from harmony, unlike the deficiency, which came from fracture. We came from harmony and order. Anyway, so that's what the memes are. Did that answer the meme question?
Yes, it did. It kind of sounds like egregores, right, Vance?
Yes, very much so. That's a pretty complex subject, how they interact and where they come from and so forth. We have a couple other questions.
Sure.
Is it time for some more?
Yeah.
One, it's about the memes, which is, can Gnosis not come through memes if it's passed by informational exchange? I just read the question as verbatim.
Well, the Gnosis, you can learn about Gnosis through the memes. I mean, my Gnostic Gospel Illuminated is a meme bundle that I am imploring you to pick up. But you have, according to the Tripartite Tractate, and in my opinion as well, you need to decide for yourself, of your own free will, that you prefer the light to the darkness. I think that the Gnosis is a spiritual turn. It's not how much you know. That's why you don't need to know any particular thing, because it's not what you know, and it's not whether you know how to do rituals. It's simply the knowledge that you come from above, and to above you shall return. That is the meta knowledge that is trying to be transmitted. And I keep trying to say this, and I keep verging off, but let me try to say this again. Imagine if you were the mind of God, or even simply the pleroma. Imagine you're the angel sitting up there and you're like, okay, there's a bunch of mud down here. There's this big mess and there's some mud and a bunch of bacteria or whatever. How am I going to let them know that we're up here and that we are the fruits of the Father and the Son? How can we let that muskrat know, or that electron know, or that skin cell know? Because I think everything is a consciousness that's going to be returned. It's all going to be, it all has to come back. It's all parts of the broken body. So it's like every way possible, the pleroma is sending us messages. Yeah, that's what I've been trying to get at. That's what the fractals are about. They're reverberations, they're fractals. It's like, here, let me tell you in DNA. Here, let me tell you in countless television shows and movies. Here, let me tell you in all this science fiction. Here, I'm going to really tell Philip K. Dick, and then maybe you'll listen to him. And like that. Here, I'm going to tell Terrence McKenna too. Okay, maybe, okay, we'll tell Sid Ropp too. Okay. But anyway, the point being, how do they let us know? They tell visionaries in their paintings. They tell hymn writers through hymns. If you listen to the 1860s Methodist hymnal lyrics, they're all about the fullness and the eons. It's not as constrained as the Bible, because they were the productions of musicians. They were the productions of songwriters in creative Holy Spirit mode, making these holy songs. So I cry at hymns all the time. You know, I just am so easily touched. But anyway, because it's just so beautiful. The point being, imagine the slime mold trying to send these vibrations about them and trying to get us to want to come home, because down here we're thinking HBO is pretty good. We thinking, you know, we like the sex or whatever. We really like the Food Channel. You know, whatever the thing is, we got to get over it. It's good to be depressed. It's good to hate the world. You got to get over it, because you got to lay your burdens down. See, that's another one. Lay my burdens down, Lord. You got to lay your burdens down, your meme bundle down, so that next time you go onward and upward, you're gone, baby.
And
you're
you
free.
equate the memes with the Hindu concept of samkara, right?
I imagine that I do. I think of each meme as part of Anu, as part of the as a small, the memes are like a cloud of confusion. They're like McKenna had that vision of, knowledge cluttering up the transpersonal consciousness. I mean, He said that the knowledge explosion was going straight up and it was crapping up the space. It's getting crapped up with all the selfies and stuff, right? It's not just the cloud. It's literally our transpersonal consciousness is becoming so self-centered. And so the basic thing is so that's what the message that the slime mold's trying to send us, the reverberations and all the stories. And then Tiger Woods wins that golf tournament and he's redeemed, praise God. And we're all redeemed, see?
Yes, because of Tiger Woods, yes.
Exactly. That's why we all love the same stories. And there's very few stories. There are really very few stories. It's it's peculiar, if you ask me, how few stories there are. How few ways there are to do anything. It's always about love and hate and justice. And here's a funny thing, Vance, you might appreciate this. In the simple explanation side of things, as opposed to the Gnostic gospel, I like to see, if you go up high enough at the meta level, when I write, I'm trying to make it consciously as applicable to an atom as it is to me. So I never talk about people, I talk about units of consciousness, because the atom's got its own story, it's got its own stuff it does. It's like, woohoo, there's some oxygen, let's make water. It's like that, they do their thing. And I think they're all conscious at their own little fun, because they were all eons, they're conscious. I think they're literally conscious. So I think that what we call sport, please, what could be more molecular or atomic than football or basketball or soccer, watching the ball get moved, see the ball, move the ball. Everything plays that, whether it's a corpuscle or whether it's an atom or a photon, everybody plays sports. That's the random photons that are going this way or that one. He's going for a home run. It's like that. Yes, I personify greatly.
Anthropomorphize, perhaps.
Yes.
Anthropomorphize and personify. Yes, indeed.
But how about deceiving spirits? That was another question I just saw. that I missed before.
Deceiving spirits?
Yeah.
Okay,
so it says, I am the light, and I am the light, but really it's the dark.
Right. Okay. Well, and how is it the typical person to know, or how do I know if I'm being deceived? Is that what the question is trying to get at, or is this a different?
Well,
because I know from personal experience.
The way I interpret it is like something comes to you and gives you information supposed to be gnosis, but maybe it's really a deceiving entity that's trying to lead you astray.
Yeah.
No, well, stories, evil spirit tells you to go out and you fall off a cliff or something like that. Anything.
Well, here's the thing. Once evolution reaches these various levels over the 4 billion years on Earth, and all the eons are becoming instantiated, and our various subselves, the archetypes and subpersonalities that we all have in different measure within our personality. Some people like you have your own pantheon of gods, if you want to think of it that way. You understand what I mean? So, all right, now I lost the question because I was thinking about the pantheon of gods.
Evil spirits.
Oh, so the evil spirits. Right. Okay, so they are also evolving, but they are still of the imitation. They came out of the small, egoic, me. All they want is dominion. That's the only goal of the deficiency and the imitation is dominion. There is no other thing. It doesn't matter what they're for. It's all about winning the game. It's only about winning the game. It doesn't matter what the goal is. It's only about winning. It's all about winning. That's the deficiency. It wants to win, and it wants to be the one to win because it's egoic. So as humans evolved, or animals, or whomever, the demons also co-evolved in their own, but you see, they are not as strong as the eons. Remember, the force is better than the darkness, right? So the light will always win in the end. So there are demons, and they are aggregations, spiritual aggregations of little guys that broke off of Logos at the beginning of the fall. And now there are organisms evolved enough that they can aggregate themselves. Some demons live in the transpersonal consciousness. All those memes, all those just think, what's going to go to heaven and what's not? What's going to make it to heaven? Right. You were saying Barry Manilow songs? It's like that. It's all going to be happiness. We're going to forget about death and suffering. It's all going to be happiness. So the only things that will survive are the Barry Manilow songs, and it's all going to be happiness. It's hilarious.
Maybe down here on Earth is not so bad after all.
Well, it's all of that, but with all the crap gumming up the works all the time, with the egoic selfishness that takes us away from being able to build the paradise. So anyway, that's what demons are. And I think they can be formed out, they come out of the transpersonal consciousness, though. Get this. Think about a drug. Think about a really insidious, addictive drug like meth. It's as if the meth is a demon because it seems to have its own way. It's like everybody that then uses the meth begins to have these meth head same thoughts, and they lose their teeth the same way, and they get holes in their brain in the same places. I mean, the meth is a aggregation of powers of the worst kind, of the imitation. So it is a kind of a demon. But I also think that, like in the New Testament, when they talk about demons, Jesus was casting out viruses. Those are demons. And bacteria can also be considered demons. So how do you know if it's good or bad? Because it's always onward and upward. The demons come from below. I mean, come on, you can tell good from bad. I mean, can't people tell good from bad? Because if you're hanging around, here's the thing. If you are immersed super deep in the imitation, then you are surrounded by what the Buddhists call Maya. You're surrounded by delusion. Mm-hmm. The deeper you live in the imitation, and that I believe includes video games, the deeper you live in the imitation, the more prey you are to the imitation's negative influences. You open yourself up to demons. That's why you are supposed to be a goody two shoes. It's not because you're not supposed to have fun. It's because you really would rather be a conduit for happiness than for, cutting someone's head off. Is
Well
that too?
said. Yeah. All I can say is at the Copacabana. So, but I do have, as we get to the end of this very engaging interview, which I have really enjoyed, of course, I love Gnostic creation myths. I think there's 100 lessons I could learn from them and new wrinkles each time. But the question, this is from a simple explanation of absolutely everything. And that's something to help because you give solutions. You just don't talk about the plight we're in, Sid. And that is the simple golden rule. Tell us about
that's
that.
nice. Oh, thanks for bringing that up, Miguel. Well,
Because I always, unfortunately,
nice.
I drop the ball. I don't treat others like you'd be, it's so simple, and I drop the ball.
It seems to me that the basis for ethical systems and moral systems and religions is, and then I went to the meta level. What could we really pull in the most ecumenical way possible? What could we condense upward out of the religions? And that is this. And by the way, this applies equally, you see, it applies equally to a molecule or a cell in your body or to a planet in a solar system as to you as a human. So I've tried to write it to be absolutely applicable to everything in creation. And it goes like this. Everything, no matter what their level of hierarchy or their sphere of responsibility, because as Vance pointed out, by the way, subatomic particles are very small, but they're everywhere. So in the singular, it has a very small point of view and a very small job, just turn left or right or whatever. But in the aggregate, in its hive mind, it knows everything. It's practically omniscient. So that's a way to think about the distribution of consciousness amongst hierarchies. See, they've got their own levels. Anyway, here's the deal. The golden rule is this. Every unit of consciousness in the universe reaches out to its neighbors on either side, its neighbors. And so for us, that would be probably other humans, to hold hands and share information, love, that is caring, and assistance to level up to the next hierarchical level. That's the really cold way to put it. Everything's a level up. You know, the subatomic particles, they hold their little hands and they become atoms, and the atoms hold hands, they become molecules, molecules hold hands, they become elements, the elements hold hands, they become aggregates of various kinds. And then the cellular system, the living systems, they work again in the same exact manner. Everything holds hands, levels up to the next thing. So all the skin cells, they're all individuals, yet they're all skin, and there is a skin unit of consciousness in charge of all the skin, as well as all the little skin cells, etc., ad infinitum. So that's it. Hold hands, work with others. Don't be obstructionist, because that is not the way of God. God is creative. So create something better, volitional. But obstructionism, it's not a good thing, because that's cancer. That's cancer. What happens when the skin becomes obstructionist? I go to the dermatologist and he cuts it out. So we don't want to do that. That's not a good thing. If you can't be honest about buying into the meme bundle of the organism of which you are holding hands to make the next level up, get the heck out of that meme bundle and find one that works for you. How about that? Do you like that?
I like it a lot. And I like it more than a Barry Manilow song, but I actually might go listen to Barry Manilow tonight. So maybe I can get my fractal of Barry Manilow. So, but I think we have come to the end. I think, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I've given my reasons. I have new respect for this text and for what it really means. And I know I can get a lot of insights. And I watched your slide by itself with, as I was talking to you, Sid, I watched the different slides.
Oh, yeah.
And I was playing some classical music and they're like mandalas, and I got a lot out of it. And I think a lot of the audience who are Gnostic minded or in Gnostic churches or are artists, I would give it a shot because it's good stuff. So,
or ex-Christians who find Christianity leaves too many holes, too many unanswered questions. I think this has those answers.
Exactly. I mean, it's a long time to deprogram, and why not just have fun and make art while you're deprogramming? And that's the way I've always wanted to do it. So I want to thank the audience who's been here tonight. Thanks for your questions, your company. It's great to see some of you there who we talk a lot to in the Inner Sanctum of Gnosis group. Sid, you've been invited. I don't know if you've accepted the invitation.
I have, yes. Thank you.
Well, please come. If others have questions after this for Sid, post them at the Inner Sanctum. Let's have some more conversations. And but thank you very much. And Vance, thanks for keeping us company here.
I did my best.
Did a great job as always. Yes, that cosmic background. So good deal. And Sid, it was really wonderful having you on Aeon Byte. And
thank you. My pleasure.
I really enjoy your work, and hopefully we'll have you on in the future. And good luck with your book. And we'll talk soon here or somewhere else in some fractal version.
Anytime.
All right. Well, everybody else, thank you. And yes, thanks for being here. Thanks for being yourself, your true self, because you are indeed a reflection of the pleroma. You just need to figure it out and get that anamnesis, a fractal. But as above, so below, as within, so without, we all have the potential, the pleroma inside of us, that shard of infinity. So thank you very much, and good night, everybody.